a quote which we got from you, is that statistically in the UK now, about 55% of all calories are ultra processed calories. So that means we so much junk food, so much more over the last kind of number of years. And in Ireland, it's something like 50%. In the US, I think it's something more towards 60%. And I just wondered, like, how is the current gut, like the average person, Joe or Mary on the street, like how is the average person's gut today?
It's not good. I mean, we've spoken before about this whole concept, all health begins in the gut. That's a very old fashioned concept.
And even where does that concept come from? Like what's the...
That was Hippocrates 2,500 years ago, telling his disciples all health begins in the gut. Well, he actually said all disease begins in the gut, but I guess it's nice to put a positive spin, with apologies to Hippocrates, that all health begins in the gut. And, even then, 2,500 years ago, he was teaching his disciples, the kind of very basic principles that would ultimately develop into modern medicine. But he taught them a lot about food, let food be thy medicine is not a concept attributed to Hippocrates, but also all health begins in the gut. And he would teach his disciples that when they were trying to help people to get better, they should look at food and food intake, etc. And in the last 20 years, we've learned that there's a lot of truth in that ancient wisdom, that, gut health really does matter. And if your gut health is poor, then your overall health is poor. And a lot of that comes down to the food that you're eating. I mean, you mentioned a moment ago that, we get 50 to 60% of our calories from ultra processed food. Crisps
and maybe if you can explain what those...
So basically, these are the foods, like the food industry since about the 1950s has hit on this concept that you can make food not in your kitchen, but in a factory. And you can take out all the perishable stuff, you can take out the fiber, and then you can mix in flavor enhancers and emulsifiers. And they've developed artificial carbohydrates like maltodextrin, and all these flavor enhancers that make these products, these food-like products, taste like something you'd like to eat. So you can take a little fruit cake off the shelf in your filling station that's got an expiration date like in 3 or 4 months' time, right? And you can eat it, but it tastes moist, like it's just been cooked. And your kind of primitive brain goes, oh, this is lovely, this is comfort food. But of course, what you're tasting is an artificially generated food matrix that's been very carefully designed to appeal. But these junk foods aren't food. They contain more sugar, more salt, artificial flavors and emulsifiers. They're usually low in fiber. I mean, very simply, think about the difference between an apple and an apple Pop-Tart. An apple being the original, the apple Pop-Tart being the ultra-processed version. All the good stuff is taken out, all the fiber and the phytonutrients, the beneficial stuff that a healthy gut thrives on. And instead we put in all these junk food chemicals that demonstrably negatively impact your gut microbiome and your digestive health. But that's only one aspect of the standard Western diet that's problematic when it comes to gut health. Of course, the number one would be fiber deficiency. So we don't eat fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, and legumes anymore. In countries like the US and the UK, Ireland, etc., those foods, which are the foods that have benefited our gut health and kept things ticking over nicely and improved human health and digestive health for generations, have become, maybe 9 to 10% of our calories. The rest of the calories coming from animal products, 100 kilos of meat per person per year, coming from saturated fats and dairy and highly processed foods. And for many people, those foods make up most of their calories. And that's not the person's fault. I'm not shaming anybody here. I'm not stigmatizing anyone here. In a way, I'm kind of shaming and stigmatizing the system. That's where our food systems have led us in order to make these kind of cheap, shelf-stable foods that are easier to manufacture, easier to ship, easier to put on the shelf and leave there. Easier to make profit. And what's the result? Because we're eating the standard Western high meat, high dairy, high processed food, high ultra-processed food, low plant, low fiber diet. Our digestive systems have never seen anything like this in history. Humans have been around for 100,000 years. And people can argue about whether ancient humans were hunter-gatherers or gatherer-hunters or plant-based apes or whatever. We'll never know, okay? But the evidence is very, very clear that this new standard Western approach to eating isn't good for digestive health in any way. And then you look at...
And how do you classify that? Is that down to... Because I know the gut is made up of a microbiome, which is a collection of bacteria and microorganisms in your gut. And how do you actually determine does someone have a good gut or a bad gut, or a healthy gut or an
It's
unhealthy
largely
gut?
down to the diversity of the different strains and the proliferation.
Well, the first thing I would say is even without understanding the science behind it, you just have to look around. So we talked about standard Western diet, also called the standard American diet. Okay, so originated in the US, probably, pre-war, post-war refrigeration came on, the ability to produce, microwave meals and all that kind of stuff, one built on top of the other, fast food joints, McDonald's and all that, just kind of dominated the food system, created. Now we've got a situation where food deserts exist and dietary intakes are generally very poor. So what's gut health like in the country that invented the standard Western diet? It's terrible. So irritable bowel syndrome, so digestive symptoms, bloating, constipation, etc., affect 45 million Americans. 1 in 5 Americans has gastroesophageal reflux disease. So one of the most commonly prescribed medications on planet Earth are antacid medications, things like proton pump inhibitors, omeprazole, ranitidine, famotidine. These are medications that switch off the acid secretion in your stomach, which is a really important of healthy digestion and normal digestion, but tablets that switch that process off to try and put a lid on the indigestion and dyspeptic symptoms that 1 in 5 adult Americans are living with. 1 in 3 US adults under the age of 50 have a condition called diverticular disease, these little pouches that form in the side of the large bowel of people who habitually eat a low-fiber diet. It causes abdominal pain, discomfort, abscesses. It can even cause perforation. I've taken care of patients over the years who've died from diverticular disease. It affects 1 in 3 adults under the age of 50, costs the UK health system $2.5 billion a year. In the US, the UK, Ireland, Australia, bowel cancer has become so common that it affects more than 1 in 20 adults in their lifetime. Now, there are still countries in the world, there's still populations in the world where bowel cancer is almost unheard of. And if you go looking for it, you won't find it. So like in rural Africa, for example, the studies have been done that you don't get precancerous bowel polyps in middle-aged people living in rural Africa with a rural diet and lifestyle, with a high fiber diet and lifestyle, 50, 60, 70 grams of fiber per day. They don't get precancerous polyps. They don't get bowel cancer. Now, I'm not saying they don't have other health challenges. They obviously do, right? But that disease is a standard Western diet disease. In the US, we've got a condition called fatty liver disease, non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. So this is a condition that you get, which is largely driven by the standard Western diet, refined sugars and animal fat, drive the deposition of fat on your liver. And we think of fat as just being, this extra tissue that sits on our tummy and it just sits there and it's inert. But it's not, of course. Excess abdominal fat and visceral fat is a pro-inflammatory tissue. It drives inflammation in your system.
And inflammation is the root of all disease.
Inflammation, again, is a common thread that runs through so many diseases, like chronic, unchecked inflammation. So if you've got fatty liver disease, you run a risk of developing hepatitis, really, an inflammation of the liver that we call non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, which affects about, NAFLD, fatty liver disease, affects about 100 million Americans now. I think It affects about 1 in 4 adults under the age of 50 in the UK. And it's become one of the leading causes of chronic liver disease. One of the main reasons now for people needing a liver transplant, where in countries like the UK, Ireland, the US, we've always associated with excess alcohol, right? People they drink too much alcohol, they get cirrhosis, and they end up needing a liver transplant, right? But one of the leading causes of needing a liver transplant now isn't alcohol anymore, although it's still up there, obviously. It's non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is largely driven by a standard Western diet. So,
which is animal-based foods and refined processed foods.
Refined, saturated fat, animal protein,
low fiber,
highly processed foods, low plant intake, low fiber intake. And of course, low fiber intake is just a proxy for low vitamin C intake, vitamin A, vitamin E, phytonutrients, antioxidants, and all the other stuff that goes with the plant fiber. Because you can only get those beneficial compounds by filling your plates with the same foods that our digestive systems have been working on digesting through the history of the human race, the fruits and the vegetables, the whole grains, the legumes, the nuts and the seeds. And you've probably had a lot of, well, I know you have, because I listened to the podcast. You've had a lot of people on talking about other aspects of health that are benefited by eating this diet. It's the same answer. It's the same approach to food, like eating like the healthiest people in the world is eating like that. And as a gastroenterologist who deals with the sharp end of these conditions all the time, takes care of people who are really suffering, their digestive health is really suffering, either from a life-threatening condition, like some of the things we've discussed already, or just, conditions like acid reflux or bloating or IBS, that's really negatively impacting their quality of life. I mean, when your patient says to you, well, how should I eat? What foods do you recommend? When you go and you look at the evidence, and the same signals are coming through, whether it's preventing fatty liver disease or reversing fatty liver disease, whether it's preventing colorectal cancer, whether it's preventing bowel polyps, whether it's, reducing your risk of developing Crohn's disease, reducing your risk of developing diverticular disease. It just comes back to the same thing. Healthy, unprocessed plants in variety. Ditch the junk. Ditch the dairy. Milk is for babies. Animal products are optional. Should make up a small amount of your food. If you're eating red meat, the safest amount to eat, probably none. But you could probably get away with having maybe red meat once every couple of weeks. But you should always view it as optional. And on that day, when you have that piece of red meat as a maybe once a month treat, just remember that even on that day, if you had a bean casserole instead of a beef casserole, you're still making a healthier choice on that given day. So a whole food plant-based diet, which is, the way that I ask my patients to move towards, ticks all the right boxes for excellent gut health, So that's really, as a gastroenterologist, that's what's led me here. That's why I'm sitting here recording this podcast with you guys,